want to get your thoughts on the counteroffensive, and one of the reasons why you had Biden administration putting for censorship, because you have the corporate media in our country that essentially just repeats whatever the Ukrainian government says, the Ukrainian PR agency, and no one should trust them as far right as you can throw a stick. Like, you shouldn't trust these people at all, right? But the U.S. government just repeat whatever they want the Ukraine propaganda machine to say. We've seen the counteroffensive. I've seen numbers where it's around 70,000 Ukrainians have died since the start of the counteroffensive. What's your thoughts on the state of this war and the West continuing to push it despite massive casualties and no possible win in sight from the Ukrainian government? But I just want to get your overall thoughts on the state of the war right now to get started.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we have to understand, at least from my perspective, that this was a war that was thrust upon Russia. People say, well, Scott, Russia invaded on February 24th, 2022. Russia's the one, the aggressor. I think the history on this is much more complicated and actually favors Russia in the outcome. This is a war that's been pushed on Russia from the very end of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the NATO had a decision about what to do. It was created to contain Soviet power. Soviet power is finished. One of the agreements made when the Berlin Wall came down, Germany was going to be unified. There were 500,000 Soviet troops in Germany occupying it from the end of the Second World War. And the Soviets said, Mikhail Gorbachev said, if I pull these guys out, we don't want NATO troops coming in. We need a guarantee that NATO's not going to take advantage of this. And they were promised not 1 inch eastward. NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward. That turned out to be one of the greatest lies of all time. NATO expanded. In 2008, an American ambassador, William Burns, he was the ambassador to Russia. Today, he's the director of the CIA. But in 2008, early 2008, he wrote a memorandum. The title of it was "Niet means niet." That's Russian for "no means no." And what he was saying is that the Russians have drawn a red line about NATO inviting Ukraine in, that if NATO makes a bid on Ukraine, that this will lead eventually to a Russian military intervention. That's how seriously Russia takes this. So the reason why I bring that up is cause and effect. The ambassador, the American ambassador to Russia, writes a memo that says if NATO invites Ukraine to join, this will lead to a war with Russia. He's saying it straight up, not maybe. He said it will. He wrote that memorandum in early 2008, November 2008. NATO invites Ukraine to join. All right, so what does that tell you? They were gunning for a war from the very beginning. And then 2014, the Maidan revolution or coup, the CIA-backed effort to replace a constitutionally elected government of President Viktor Yanukovych and replace him. And this is where most Americans, it just blows my mind, they don't get it. Replace him with literal Nazis. Literal Nazis. Not maybe Nazis, not part-time Nazis. The full-time, Sig Heil, swastika-wearing, jackboot, SS-worshipping Nazis. And we empowered them, and they came into power. And then a conflict started. Russia could have finished the conflict in 2014, but the West begged Putin not to destroy the Ukrainian army, the Nazis. And Putin agreed. They created the Minsk agreements. And it was supposed to lead to a ceasefire, to Ukraine redoing its constitution so that the Nazis would stop persecuting the Russians. They outlawed the Russian language. They outlawed the Russian. There you go. Look at those beautiful pictures of those freedom.
Look, the freedom fighters, Scott. They're freedom fighters.
Yeah, the American government's paying these people. But the fact is, the Minsk Accords, Putin thought it was a bid for peace. It turns out they were a sham. How do we know they're a sham? Well, the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, who negotiated them, admits it. We only did it to buy time so NATO could build up the Ukrainian army so it could more effectively fight the Russians. The French president, Francois Hollande, said the same thing. Petro Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, the same thing. The West was never serious about peace. They always wanted war. And when it was apparent that the Ukrainians were getting ready to make a move on the Donbass, which is a contested region, Russia carried out what's called preemptive self-defense, meaning that you don't have to wait for the guy who has a baseball bat claiming he's going to beat you in the head with it to actually take a swing. If he picks up the bat and walks towards you, you assume that he's going to do what he said he's going to do, so you pop him in the face. So Russia popped Ukraine in the face. So this war was provoked by Russia. It's a war that Russia never really wanted, and they've been trying to end. Again, most people may not realize this, but Russia actively started negotiations within days of the military action.
Yes.
Russia they wanted Ukraine just to agree not to join NATO. That's it. Just don't join NATO. And they got Ukraine to almost within less than a month of the war started to go, and they had a peace treaty initialed, ready to go. But NATO came in. They sent Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister at the time, to tell Zelensky, you can't sign this agreement. If you sign this agreement, the West won't support you anymore. So Zelensky withdrew from the agreement. Again, Russia has been seeking to end this conflict from day one in a negotiation that says Ukraine will not be part of NATO. But NATO kept pouring today now $150 billion worth of material, training, financial support into Ukraine, allowing Ukraine to rebuild their army 4 times. Okay, and what does that mean when you say rebuild? It means that the one army was destroyed. So they rebuilt it. That army was destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed. This is the 4th iteration, and it's being destroyed as we speak. The Ukrainians will have to build a 5th. And the thing is, they're running out of men, and the West is running out of weapons, and everybody's running out of money. This is a tragic war. The number of dead on both sides is outrageous. There's talk right now of 400,000 Ukrainian dead, 400,000, 71,000 since this counteroffensive started.
And they want more. I don't know if you saw the story where the United States was critical of the Ukrainian government because they were too casualty averse. They are 100% okay with an entire generation of Ukrainian men being wiped out. For what? But go ahead.
Yeah, Americans should reflect on this. On both fronts, Pacific and European theaters during World War II, we lost 350 some odd thousand dead. I know someone's going to fact check that number and say that's not exactly right. I agree, but it's over 300,000, under 400,000. And that was fighting the Japanese and the Germans on 2 theaters, a world war. The Ukrainians have lost more than that in 600 days of fighting in a limited, geographically limited conflict. It tells you how bloody this fight is. America broke our back in Vietnam with 58,000 dead. The Russians have probably suffered in 600 days somewhere in the vicinity of 50,000 dead. It's a lot of dead. This is a war that's hurting both countries, but it's not going to end unless Russia can't allow this to end, because Russia views Ukraine becoming NATO as an existential threat to its survival. It can't allow this to happen. Just like we couldn't allow, Soviet missiles in Cuba, and we were willing to go to war to get rid of those missiles. I know people are going to write back, well, Scott, what about the Jupiter missiles in Turkey? I agree. It was a more complicated issue. I'm just saying that we couldn't allow that to happen. The Russians couldn't allow the Jupiter. We almost went to war, but we moved those missiles around, got rid of them. Russia can't allow Ukraine to become part of NATO. It can't.
I like to frame it like this. And I want to see if you agree with me, because I frame it like this. Imagine if Russia, China, Iran funded anti-American extremists in Mexico who banned the English language. They had bases all over and funded the most extreme that killed Americans, that was violent extremists. How would America react? Most people would say, of course, America would go to war with them. Not only America would go to war with them, every country would do exactly what Russia is doing, every single one. So if we know that every single country will behave the same way that Russia is doing, why is the criticism placed on Russia? Why isn't the criticism pushed on people that provoked Russia in behaving the way that every single country will behave? Do you agree with that? Because that's how I say it. Like, Russia behaving as every other country will behave. So especially as people who live in the United States, the onus should be on us to criticize our government that 100% provoked Russia. Do you agree or disagree with that? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you. Look, Russia's biggest sin was refusing to roll over and play dead.
Yeah.
In the 1990s, again, I just asked people to go and do the research on this. When the Soviet Union fell, the United States, and together with its European allies and the collective West, went into Russia. And under the pretense of trying to help Russia revive its economy, what we really did is try to hijack the Russian economy, to steal the wealth of Russia out of Russia, enrich ourselves, impoverish a nation, to create conditions that would have the nation break apart. We didn't want democracy. We wanted something that we controlled. We called it democracy, but it wasn't. Boris Yeltsin, this alcoholic leader, was not a democratically elected leader. Yeah, he won a vote, but in 1993, put tanks on the street of Moscow and fired rounds into the parliament, killing parliamentarians because they disagreed with him. How's that democracy? In 1996, we bought the Russian election. We went in there and bought the Russian election. Time magazine bragged about it, the best election money can buy. But the thing about the 90s, it wasn't just about a failed, politics or when they talk about what happened in the 1990s in Russia, the numbers still haven't been calculated, but there are some reports coming out now that speak between 10 and 20 million Russians dying directly or indirectly because of the poverty, because of the collapse of society. The suicide rate was beyond belief.
And it's crazy that liberals will cheer that on. They cheered.
And
so, go ahead.
And so that Russia, Boris Yeltsin, near the end of his time in 1999, realized that he had screwed up. That this was and he also realized that he was surrounded by wolves, his family and his associates, who, when he went away, would just jump in and rip Russia apart. And he turned to the one man who wasn't corrupt, the one man who stood apart. And his name was Vladimir Putin. And he said, "I want you to be president." And Putin said, "No, I don't want it." And he said, "Why?" He said, "Because I can't do this job. I'm not ready for this job." And Yeltsin said, "But you got to do it because there's no one else." So Putin was sort of the president, didn't want to be president. And his biggest sin was refusing to become Boris Yeltsin too. What Putin did is, over the course of the next 23 years, is save Russia. He literally saved the nation. And here in America, we resent him for doing this because that's not the trajectory we wanted Russia to go on. We didn't want Russia to stand on its own feet. We didn't want Russia to rebuild its economy, to rebuild its. I just got back from Russia. I spent 26 days in Russia in May. And I have to tell you, well, no nation is perfect, and every nation has problems. If you look hard enough, you will find problems. And I saw problems. I'm not going to pretend there weren't problems in Russia. But what I saw was a nation that was doing pretty good. I saw clean.
That's what I heard as well.
Our
good friend Fiorella in Moscow. She said the same thing. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I can walk 5 minutes from my house. I'll be surrounded by a sea of homeless people. I can go to Clinton Avenue, and there's a black ghetto there that's boarded up, burnt out because cops won't show up there. The fire department won't show up there. The city won't invest into it. That's right here, just literally 5 minutes from my house. We have the worst thing. The infrastructure is collapsing, is crumbling, and all that. I went to Russia. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but man, it was clean.
Yeah.
I didn't see homeless in the streets. I didn't see. I got dogs that like to bark, but I didn't.
It's all good. And remember, Scott, that's despite the fact that nobody is sanctioning us. The United States.
It's not like we have the world strangling us. Russia has the whole world sanctioned, and guess what? Their economy. This is the thing that blew my mind. I mean, I knew about it. I mean, I read about it, but to go in, I went to Novosibirsk, which is the third largest city, but it's the fastest growing economy in Russia. It is just thriving. This is a nation that's supposed to be under sanctions. They have so many construction projects, so many companies coming in from around the world. We in the West are so hung up on the fact of American exceptionalism. We're the best nation in the world.
Yes, God.
And the Europeans are the best continent in the world. Hey, guys, guess what? We are second class. I saw a first class nation called Russia.
God damn it, yes.
And they had everybody coming in. And it saddened me because, some of these businesses were developed with Americans in mind. I went to this, it's called the Academia City outside of Novosibirsk, but it's where they have a business incubator. So if you are a businessman, an entrepreneur with an idea, you can come there, you pitch it to the board. If they accept it, they bring you into the community and they help you build your business. It's an incubator. And there in the headquarters building, they had this restaurant. And it was, on the walls were all the photographs of American actors. They were playing American pop music in the background. They were serving American style food. They had their brewery right next to them where they're doing their own home brew beer. And they have a festival every summer. It's a brew fest. And I'm like, this is where American microbrewers should be coming here to meet these people, talking about, maybe expanding their business, because these are people who clearly are looking at a business model that is appreciative of American culture and the American approach, and you could replicate it. But there were no Americans there. I was the only American there, and they were adjusting. They were like, well, we'd like Americans to be here, but we're not going to go away. So, we're bringing in the Indians, we're bringing in the Chinese, we're bringing in the Africans, we're bringing in, the rest of the world, and we're going to do business with them because they're good people. They want to do business, and that's the way it is. Russia is booming economically. I wish we were the joke that a lot of Russians told me while I was over there is they said, because they joked about in 1998, me and Joe Biden went at it in a Senate hearing, and so they're like, Scott, you know Joe Biden? And I said, well, not really, but yeah. They go, well, next time you see him, just say for us, thank you, Joe. Thanks, Joe. Because of the sanctions, they're actually doing.
I see. And I mentioned the sanctions part because I always want to highlight how broken and how ridiculous our system is. The United States is the richest country in human history, but we got massive amount of poverty, massive amount of homeless, tens and tens of thousands of Americans die a year because they don't have health care. And this is despite us having a massive amount of wealth and the fact that we have no superpower sanctioning us. Yeah. Right? I don't know how you feel about socialism. I'm a socialist, right? But people who have critiques of socialism, I will ask them, I wish we can see a country implement socialism without sanctions. You have Cuba that lost hundreds of billions of dollars with the Cuban embargo, but their life expectancy is higher than us. They have better education than us. So you have countries that are losing wealth, but they're able to produce results. I'm not saying, like you said, I'm not saying these countries are perfect. I think that's ridiculous to say that. The DPRK, there could be a lot of criticism of that, but the United States sanctioned that country to death. They still feeding their people. So you understand, our country got wealth, no one's sanctioning us, and we still have Skid Row. Like, you guys understand how unbelievably bad that is? But go ahead, Skip, if you want, Scott, you want to chime in.
Say, we're our own worst enemy. We are our own worst enemy. And it doesn't have to be this way, because again, I'm somebody who's been around the world many, many, many times. And I will tell you this, that the world, there was a time when they looked up to America. And the world's not stupid. That's the other thing people need to understand. If you don't think that the world looked at America in the 1960s and saw racism, saw problems, and everything, the world was aware of all of America's problems, but they still believed in the potential of America. They looked at America and they saw a society working, struggling, fighting to make itself better, to improve, to fix the deficiencies. But they liked the potential of America. They liked that America stood for something that they thought they wanted to be part of, that the freedoms and things of that nature. We have thrown away that goodwill. We have thrown it away, and we've done it because
that's a great point.
We don't know how to behave. I mean, imagine if you invited somebody in your house and they just came in, they started immediately telling you, well, that's your refrigerator shouldn't be organized this way. Your pots and pans, no, you can't do this. That's a bad color rug, wrong kind of furniture. And you're like, dude, it's my house. I live here. See, America can't do anything without telling people how they have to live their life.
And then their house is ugly as hell. Like, they did that and they got ugly ass rugs. Ugly.
Well, thanks. And I see you see part of my house back there and you just called it ugly as hell. Okay, thank you.
No, I'm just saying, imagine if you had that guy criticizing your house and then you saw their house was shit. That's what America is.
Yeah, you're looking at it going, well, wait a minute. My rugs are clean.
Yeah.
Dog poop on them.
There are a lot of breakdown, a lot to cover while I still have you here. And I'm gonna show this to bring up your point earlier. And this is what a lot of Americans do not understand. A lot of Western brainwashed people don't understand that Putin and Russia did everything they could to prevent this war. And I'll read this quickly and I'll get your reaction, or you can add more to this if you want. But you have President Putin in autumn of 2021 sent a draft treaty. And by the way, this is the NATO chief, Jens Stoltenberg, admitting that NATO is directly responsible for this war. So Putin, this is what he's saying, in the autumn of 2021 sent the draft treaty that they want NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. And that what he sent us. And that was the precondition for not invading Ukraine. Of course we didn't sign that. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO, and to close his borders. So this is what they will openly admit, the NATO chief admit this. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you will have NATO propagandists that say, oh, NATO expansion has nothing to do with the war. You guys see how the propaganda have it both ways? So this kind of it backs up what we were saying earlier regarding how Putin and Russia wanted to prevent the war, which we all knew to be the case, and NATO wanted to provoke that.